Not true. Good morning. My name is Daniel Piña Alvarado from the PA in ELT, from the class of second language acquisition. And today we're going to analyze two theories based on psychological development and what ramifications these theories had on modern language teaching. First, we will talk about cognitivism, developed by Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, introduced in the 1950s in response to the dominant behaviorist theory that was common in the age. Piaget believed that learning was an active process of observations of the environment and synthesis of novel information with previous knowledge. Furthermore, these processes change and develop over the course of one's life as they mature, mostly since they're babies. As well as the implication that a student may find difficult to learn things out what is expected of their age, since older brains have inherent differences from younger brains. Now, the principles were that first, he believed in all his theories because he got evidence thanks to observations he made on his own nephew and his own daughter. This observation reinforced his budding hypothesis that children's minds were not merely smarter versions of adult minds, a thought that was common on the age. Older children do not just think more quickly than younger children. He suggested instead that there are both qualitative and quantitative differences between the thinking of young children versus older children. Examples of how this theory would affect the classroom teaching in general would be the application of the inductive teaching technique, where an educator provides an example or a model, and the students then determine or infer a rule. Students have to pay attention. They need to find the rule to then be able to make examples of their own. As such, since they had to think a rule for themselves, their brain will remember what they have learned more vividly. Now, this theory didn't come without criticisms. The first theory was that it was considered reductionist and generalist. It simplifies how humans work, especially when referring to the exact ages children are supposed to be able to know information. Other criticism was that cognitivism doesn't consider aspects outside the process, the cognitive process inside the brain, and the development of maturity in children. Examples are explanations from adults, the environment, the fact that many children develop differently, and many other random factors that affect how a child will get information and not considered in this insight study. Testing of this theory is inherently flawed since you depend on the thought process of someone else, something that cannot be read since you're not psychic. As well as that many experiments to prove this theory were made in unnatural and controlled environments that will evidently affect the results, making conclusions not based on real life. I thought that they could be modified in order to make this theory true. Now, forgetting those criticisms, let's say about the actual impact that this theory, or at least the believers of this theory, had on second language learning. The impact it has on language learning is to maintain the necessity to maintain the attention of the student on the subjects by providing diverse models of learning strategies that will help the student not only be interested in what they're learning, but to also process the information they're receiving and transfer it into the long-term memory alongside the information they already have. So that was cognitivism. Thanks, Piaget, for making this in the 1950s. Now let's follow Joe Rebel Russian teacher led by Vygotsky and his social culturalism. As I said, it was developed by a Russian teacher named Lev Vygotsky. Vygotsky introduced his theory during the period of the 1920s and the 1930s. But since it was in Russia, it was introduced until the 1950s. That's where it gained popularity. In general, he believes is that learning occurs through interactions with others in our communities, either peers, adults, teachers, other people that are not you, but not more than you. Oh, this brings us to the main concepts of his theory. First will be the more knowledgeable other, also known as the MKO. Someone who has a better understanding or a higher ability than the learner. In specific fields, like they know more about chemistry, so they will teach you about chemistry. And then it was the zone of proximal development, which is a zone that separates within what a child or a student in general can achieve independently and what they can achieve with guidance from other people. Vygotsky believed that a child must develop their social skills before learning other things, since he believed language and interaction were the basis of learning, as language supports other activities such as reading and writing. He believed that no individual development could be understood without analyzing the environment in which the children grew up, since it will influence how they think and what they will think about. And finally, Vygotsky believed that an interaction with peers is an effective way of developing skills and strategies. The cognitive development stems from social interaction. Examples of these practices in the classroom that are based on this theory is mostly collaborative learning, where less competent children develop with the help from more skillful peers within the zone of personal development. As such, it will equalize the level of knowledge in all the group, making less knowledgeable students be at the level of the more knowledgeable ones. For a more known technique will be role play, where social activities simulate the cultural context of the language. For example, imagine that you're in a situation and make a conversation about it. It's easier than to explain in English in isolation, since if you don't have an example, it will be too nebulous to understand. There were many criticisms of this theory, mainly because it wasn't translated until the 1950s, so no one really read it. But the main concern and criticism this theory got is scaffolding, meaning that the teacher guides the student, whether with hints or shared explanations, which is heavily dependent on verbal instructions. The concern was that it may not be equally useful in all cultures for all types of learning. And indeed, in some instances, observation and practices may be more effective ways of learning certain skills. With criticisms out of the way, let's analyze the impact it had on second language learning. According to the zone of flexible development, the teacher must plan activities that encompass not only what are the students capable of doing on their own, but also what they're capable of learning with the help of others, since it also develops their social skills. So you're developing their knowledge and you're developing the interaction they have with others. You're making a capable social member of society. And that the teacher should be the more knowledgeable other. They must know more than the students to explain it to them. So they can guide students in a smooth transition on learning. This was Daniel Piña Alvarado discussing cognitivism and social culturalism. Goodbye.